Welcome to the Colors Delight for Life. It's about life, where we share our experience, strength, and hope to help others so they have a better understanding. Thank you. Well, I'd like to welcome Pamela to It's About Life, sharing your experience, strength, and hope. And Pamela, would you like to spend about a minute introducing yourself?
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate it very much. And so, of course, my name is Pamela Aubrey, and I'm the owner of Rising Energy. So it's actually INNERGY. So a little bit different than the normal spelling, but that name was given to me after I started to get into the space of energy work, and primarily with the use of Reiki, EFT, and some various other energy psychology techniques. And so really, that was just birthed out of my own life experiences, which brought me to a place of not only needing to heal myself, but also to help my son heal, and then eventually get into a space where I could help others heal. So it was definitely a process.
Just to kind of make a connection with you, I'm a Reiki master myself.
Okay.
So I understand about the energy work and what you do with that. So
Sure.
It's really cool, how it works.
It is.
And
it's funny how Reiki masters will find each other.
I've actually connected with quite a few of them. So I'd like you to kind of go back to your childhood. I know this has been a long, I don't know how far you want to go back, but from 0 to 10, what are things you overcome, and what are things did you make it through? If you'll share it with our audience, they'd greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I had a somewhat interesting introduction into the world. At the time that I was conceived, my birth mother was actually separated from her then husband, who was very abusive. And she became pregnant with me with a man that was really not a partner of hers per se. And he was really not that interested in either one of us sticking around. And so he had kind of told her, just go away, and leave me alone, and don't tell anybody that this has even happened. And she said, no, I'm not going to do that. This has happened, and, I'm going to have a baby. Well, he was less than thrilled about that. And within a pretty short amount of time, she realized that someone had cut the brakes in her car. And so, ultimately, when they had it checked out, it was, kind of an interesting scenario, to say the least. Given that he was a mechanic, and she really felt like, okay, I think this guy's trying to get rid of either, one or both of us. And so long story short, she ultimately was trying to figure out what to do. Here she was, a very young woman in her very early 20s. She already had a daughter that she really couldn't support fully herself. Her mom was helping to raise her. And her mom had said to her, look, I just can't help raise another baby. I'm past that stage of my life, and you're going to need to surrender this baby for adoption. And so at that point, she, took on this real struggle, I guess, of her own, of figuring out what to do next, and, reaching out to different agencies and trying to just get advice and wisdom as to how to move forward. And so ultimately she did find an adoption agency to work with. It was a smaller Christian private agency, and they helped place me. She actually, after I was born, she actually kept me for 21 days, and then she ended up surrendering me at the end of those 21 days. And so it was a closed adoption. This was during the 70s, so that was very common. So I didn't, really know anything about her the majority of my growing up life. But what I did know was that there was just this kind of emptiness and this pain that I seemed to carry around with me, even as a young child, that I could never really quite put my finger on. And I think, that in addition to some of the struggles that came into play with the dynamics of my adoptive family, where I was raised in a very, very fundamentalist, authoritarian home that created in me this just deep kind of longing for, people that would support me or that I felt like would support me in my life. And so I became very, very independent at a very young age. I remember being literally like 5 years old and having an experience with my mother and thinking to myself, like having sort of this knowing that I had to take care of myself, that was going to be my job and that no one else was probably going to be able to do that. And so, that just became kind of like my MO, I think, as a child. And so I was very independent. I did as much as I could, really inside and outside the home to develop myself. And what was interesting was that even though I had that one conscious moment, a lot of the actions that followed that were unconscious. But looking back now, I realized that was really spirit and my intuition at work, helping me to, kind of create who I needed to be to operate in that environment. So that really continued. And it's interesting, looking back now, it took me a number of years to realize that I would have a lot of like smaller moments like this where spirit would intervene and we would have these interesting conversations. And it didn't occur to me at the time that that's what was happening exactly. But, looking back again, it's easy to see now that I was just being given guidance. I was being given little insights into kind of, this capacity that we have to have that connection and that type of conversation. So that gives you kind of a brief overview of those years of my life.
Quite a mouthful.
Yes.
Well, okay. We've gone through the earlier part of your life and you talked about some of your struggles and things you've overcome, which I greatly appreciate for our audience. If you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
So I'm actually 46.
You look great. I'm 56.
Well, thank you.
You look rather great. I'm actually 56 myself. So
thank you so much.
Yeah. I would have thought you're maybe late 20s, early 30s. So
wow, that's very generous.
You're welcome. I'm 4 years from 60. So you know what? Hey,
I would have never guessed that.
Oh, wow. So to me, that's good. I think that's, wonderful that you're aging so gracefully and stuff like that. So, and it looks like you really take care of yourself. So
I try to.
Well, you know what? We can only do the best we can.
That's right.
And I have a favorite phase, when things happen in life, it is what it is. So
yes, it's true.
And that's so thinking, through your teenage years up into about 28, not 28, 20, can you give me a rundown about things you've overcome and things you can share experience, strength, and hope with for our audience?
Sure. Well, so, for every person, they, have to navigate their teenage years, which is a challenge in and of itself. So I think I had all of the normal challenges, that we have, but also just, I think that there was, again, kind of this underlying feeling that something was missing in my life. And then a really significant event happened when I turned 14 and my family decided to move to another city. And that was a huge, huge transition for me. Not only then suddenly I'm now going from middle school to high school or junior high at that time, which I would have had one more year of junior high. But then in this new town, it was a new year of high school. And so that in and of itself was a huge shift to think, oh my gosh, okay, now I'm going to high school. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be at the bottom of the pile and I'm going to know no one. Right. And so trying to make that transition, plus, losing my friends, feeling like, I don't know when I'm going to see them again, and all those sorts of things that are really important to you at that stage of your life. And so that was a big struggle for me. And I fell into a depression, and I was in that depression for a good number of months. And I really just started considering, ending my life. And I planned it all out. I didn't really say anything to anyone at all. And the day came where I thought, okay, this is the day. I think I'm supposed to do this today. And so I literally sat on the edge of my bed, and I had a bottle of pills that I was going to take. And I thought, well, and the only thing honestly that had kind of like made me wait that long was that I thought, well, if this doesn't work, I'm going to be in a world of hurt. Like I'm going to be in trouble. Right. So I need to know this is going to work. So I really kind of have gotten to a point where I was confident that I thought, okay, I think this is really going to work. And so, but as I sat there in that moment, all of a sudden, and this goes back to what I was saying earlier, that voice came in, that voice of spirit came in and said, no, Pam, it's not your time yet. And I just knew, and all of the, the pain and everything wasn't gone. The depression wasn't necessarily gone, but I had this sense that, wait a minute, I do have some power in my life. I do have some control over what happens to me and what my life will look like, in the future. And I believed that voice. I did. I believed that voice that it wasn't the right time, that I wasn't supposed to go yet. And so I didn't go through with it. I put the pills back in the drawer, and, I can't really say that things necessarily got a whole lot better, because they really didn't. But I just had that little bit of strength and that little bit of knowing that I didn't have before. And, I graduated from high school, I went to college, and I got into nursing, which is kind of what I had thought I would do most of my childhood growing up. And I did that for a few years. I got married, I got pregnant and had my son. So, life kind of went on, but there was, again, there was a lot that hadn't been resolved from that, because it was just sort of like, okay, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep fighting for myself. I'm going to keep, putting one foot in front of the other. But I still hadn't gotten to a point where I had really dealt with a lot of what was behind all of that.
What would you say was behind all that, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah. So I think a big piece of it was really kind of like that sense of abandonment that came from having lost the relationship with my birth mom, but then also the piece of just not really having the relationship and support at home growing up that I needed, and a way to sort of deal with, the loss of not having my birth mom in my life.
I like to look at your 10, from age 20 to 30. Is that exactly during the time you were a nurse and those different time periods? How far into your 20s and 30s did you do that occupation and, go through these challenges? Would you say it went up to 30 or so, or before?
So it was actually into like my early 20s.
Okay.
And yeah. So I did 2 years of nursing. So I was technically, I had an associate's in nursing at that time. And then I continued on in school and actually got a degree in English and journalism. And that was really something that I found that I loved. And I went on to get an education training after I graduated. And so then for a while I was doing like substitute teaching, and I had my son. So I would work part-time substituting, or sometimes in businesses, or for a period I did do home health. So it was kind of, I would work around at that time, my then husband's schedule to try to, manage what would work best. But so there were some small transitions in there, but I did do that for a few years, as well as, then just taking on the role of mom.
That's quite a challenge, be mom and married and, all those different facets. So I'll have to admit, I've divorced a couple times. So, it's just, the one thing I can understand is, about your mom, when you grew up. I dealt with a batterer about 20 months ago. So yeah, it's, quite a thing to get out of. And your mom was quite challenged, and I can definitely see that.
Yes.
as far as that concern and some of the issues you faced. Let's kind of travel to your 30s to your 40s, that kind of time frame. And, maybe things got better, maybe, I don't know. I'll leave it up to you to share.
Sure. Yeah. Well, so I was married for a few years. And then when I turned 30, I actually had a snowboarding accident. And it was really, it was pretty significant at the time. It really changed, really altered my life. And my marriage was pretty shaky at that point anyway. The relationship had not been the greatest. And once this accident happened, I really was in a place again where I was just really on my own. I didn't have anyone, to support me. He certainly wasn't supporting me. He had kind of, checked out, emotionally and all those things from the marriage long before that. And so, I did at that point reach out to some extended family. They really helped me through that period. It was really a crisis period. I don't know sometimes looking back how I got through it, except that, I had some help along the way. And I did get some medical care and that really largely saved my life. The time my son was 5, my then husband was really just kind of AWOL. And so we ended up separating and eventually, and then within a year we were divorced. So suddenly I'm a single mom, right, with this young boy, and really trying to just figure out, okay, how do I get my health back? I really didn't have, I had lost a lot of my memories at that point. I didn't have a lot of memories even from the previous year. And so I was just trying to and even my short-term memory was very poor. So I was really just trying to, get back on my feet in that sense again, and then trying to somehow juggle the challenges of all of a sudden, being a single mom and dealing with those changes. So it was very challenging, and there were a series of different events that happened over, the next few years in my personal life. But as time went on through my 30s, I really kind of came to a point, primarily in a relationship I was in my late 30s, where I realized, I was kind of repeating history in a way. And I was in a situation much like what my birth mom had been in, and I had this realization that something really had to change, that, I had to get out of that relationship, and I needed to start moving my life in a different direction.
It sounds like you kind of felt like you married your mom, if I'm thinking correctly, and that there were a lot of questions going through your mind, probably, if I'm speaking correctly. And I know for myself, I would definitely be unsure. And sounds like you dealt with a lot of those challenges, up until you're 40. They say life begins at 40 now.
Right. Yeah. I think there's a lot of truth in that. I think to a degree I was, I think we all have these sort of patterns that we come here with, right, that are just genetic. And especially if you haven't been with your family, you don't necessarily see some of those patterns. And so I think that some of those patterns, while they were there underlying, I wasn't really aware of them for a long time. And so it took me, kind of coming to a place of being able to evaluate my life and say, okay, what's really going on here? And in my case, that meant I needed to, I had to get into a support group. I had to get into an environment where people could really help me understand what was happening. And then I was able to start going, the light bulbs started coming on like one after the other, and it was like, okay, now all of this is starting to make sense. And, from there, I was able to kind of start to turn the tide and make the changes I needed to make for myself, and learn how to deal with some of the behaviors and the people around me that were keeping me stuck in this place that really wasn't serving me.
What would you say were some of the things you were talking about, some things that, brought you out of this and, brought you to this point? Could you expand on that a little bit, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So, that was the first step for me, really, was getting into a good support group At that time, it was actually, interestingly enough, it was a recovery support group, but it was more based on recovery from, say, codependency or, those sorts of things. It's also applicable really across the board. And so I started to identify, some of the behaviors and some of the patterns through that. And then it also helped me to realize, okay, I need to branch out and have more of a support group. And I tapped back into what I had learned when I was a little bit younger, and realized that I had this connection to, that energy work. And so that's when I really started to discover Reiki. We had some in the area I lived in, we had some what they called Reiki circles where you could just go and experience it and connect with, Reiki workers and that sort of thing. So from there, I thought, okay, I could really see a shift from that. And I started to think, okay, this is something that I need to know more about. I need to learn more about this. And so I did some trainings and eventually became a Reiki master. And that led me into EFT. And then EFT, that was really a game changer for me. I mean, that really helped me to make some big changes. And at that point, I knew, okay, this is something that is not only useful for me, but something that I could share with others and use to help them too. And that was definitely a process that did not happen overnight, but that's the short version.
If there were 3 takeaways that you could give our audience, what do you think they would be? These are, things that are short and sweet and to the point, but points that they can learn from, if you don't mind sharing that.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think, number one is if you're in a difficult place, just to know that you're not alone, to know that someone else has been there before and there's someone out there who wants to help you. And really, it's just a matter of you being able to accept that, to really allow yourself to seek help and connect with the people that can help you. And there's so many resources, there's so many free resources that you can tap into. So just to know that. And then 2, to keep an open mind. Sometimes the stories that we tell ourselves are not always true. And so if there's something that you're stuck in and you feel like you just know it wholeheartedly, allow yourself to just be open-minded and say, is it possible that there's a different story than the one I'm telling myself? So just like when I was sitting on the edge of the bed and I thought, this is it, this is the time for me to go. Well, it wasn't the time for me to go as much as I thought it was. And so when we're in those moments, just thinking to ourselves, even if it's not that critical of a moment, if it's just a really difficult moment, to ask ourselves, what is this thought? What am I really telling myself right now? And then is it possible that there's another story? That can be a really powerful tool. And then I would say 3 is just to know that there's lots and lots of tools that you can use to help you move from where you are to where you want to be. I mean, there's just no shortage of those. And so if you really want to do that and you're putting your mind to it, you can get there. So keep looking for the tools and they will show up. And ask to be shown the tools that you need, because everybody's a little bit different. And so everyone's going to respond a little bit differently to a tool. And so just allow for whatever that tool is to come into you and be open to receive it.
This is your time to talk about your business. I give you a couple, 2 or 3 minutes to talk about your business and what you do and show the world what you do and showcase it. So go ahead.
Yeah. So primarily what I do is EFT. However, I mix that with Reiki. And I also get direct channeled messages for people and do dream interpretation. So, people will come to me for all different sorts of reasons. But the fact of the matter is that any one of these tools may come into play during a session. And so what's kind of amazing is that I can go into a session with someone and they may just give me a really general idea of what's happening. But as I start to work with them, we'll really start peeling the onion, right? And removing those layers and figuring out what's really underneath it all. And that's kind of the magic, I guess, so to speak, of the process that I use, is that we don't really have to dig into the nitty gritty and get down into, the terrible stories. You don't need to tell me all that. We just need to work through what comes out. And then as we do that, we can really quickly shift that energy. So it's very powerful. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming to Claire's Delight for Life. It's about life. I hope you enjoyed our podcast as much as I did, and I hope you have a great day. I'd love to let you know about a new book coming out, and it's a great help for those who, and including you, to deal with life. It's called Overcoming Depression, Anxiety, PTSD, and Stress. Who couldn't use a book like this? And it's a great program. And the book and audio are going to be made available on Audible and Amazon. We also have we are on all the social platforms, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Pinterest, and TikTok, and just about anything else you can think of. With all that being said, we also have some other wonderful books that you can get on Amazon and Audible and on our website too, which is declaresdelightforlife.com. Again, that's declaresdelightforlife.com. And those books are Clutter to Declutter. And another one is 28 Days to Declutter Your Mind. The other one is Secrets to Declutter Your Mind Now. These were written with lots of love and experience, these books, to really help you on your journey in life, because I know, having gone through so much in my life, these are written from the heart to see that you too can succeed despite your situations. And I just want you guys to know that we do have a 180-day guarantee that if any of these don't work for you, you can just email us or at support@declaresdelightforlife.com, and we will refund your money with no questions asked, because we believe that a no questions asked guarantee is the best way to have a great relationship with you. And with that said, you know what? I hope you enjoyed this episode of Declares Delight for Life. It's about life, sharing your experience, strength, and hope.